Okay, so we are live. Everybody, today we're going back in time to the 80s. You guys know we all do the 4L60 all day, every day, and we do it pretty good. I mean, we are probably most known for that, and we can do it with our eyes closed. However, today, that being said, that's the transmission everybody's most familiar with when it comes to a 4-speed overdrive. Today, we are doing 200, and I actually have a couple of them. It's taken me the better part of the day to build this up, and a couple days before, but got gentlemen coming all the way from to pick a couple of these up. And as you guys know, it's no secret, we are known for the 60 and we are known for the 700. They're virtually the same thing. And this is kind of what we started out with. We do quite a few of these. And the reason these are great is because back then they weren't. The hydraulics were absolute poor, and these came in luxury cars, your Buicks, your Caprices, like a yacht. These are great, strong transmissions other than the hydraulics. So today, we're going to be beefing this stuff up, and these things are very well capable of handling over 1,000 horsepower if you need them to. We do offer it just like the 60. So here we go with all of our stuff here. We have a variety of performance parts, and a little bit of history about this thing. It came about in the 80s, the good old 80s, and it was only around until 87 in my favorite car, the Grand National. I really enjoy those, and I personally have one of these, and I felt how it feels stock, and nobody's impressed. We change all that, and we're just showing you a brief overview today. The reason why these things are not around too much anymore is just purely because of the fact that they are time consuming. Beyond what you will see today, you won't see the labor that I had to do to get what I need to get out of this thing. Another thing about these things is the case. These are old cases, and it's an interference fit, okay? Every piece in this transmission needs to be set in just so, with just that special touch, or it just never will. No hammers, no pry bar, none of that. This is all just magic tricks, basically. The old school tranny stuff, which I got taught here not too long ago. So overall, I have the case pre-prepped up, and I did a couple things to it, such as a new bushing, new tail seal. I have a couple special tools involved in this build. Would be a little homemade device here. Okay, unlike a lot of the other transmissions where your output shaft and ring gear just sits on the case on a bearing, this one just floats. It has nothing to really ride on until we get some stuff in there. And a lot of people get scared when they wiggle the output shaft and it really wiggles, but that's actually totally normal. It's just inherent by the design. So we're going to go through this here. And this is our level 2, by the way. It's a pretty stout unit, much like our 4L60 700 R4. In my opinion, it's just a little bit smoother. And one thing I wanted to add is the reason I think these trannies are so great is because if you are doing a retrofit, let's say you have like an old truck that doesn't have a transmission tunnel, well, the bell profile is a little bit slimmer. So if you want a 4-speed overdrive and you can't fit a 700 or a 4L60 in, this really would be the way to go, if you can take the challenge up. But that's what we're here for. So starting off the build here, we have our output shaft, rear ring gear. It's a press style. There's no clip or anything like that. And a little bearing. And all you do with your tool, kind of set where it is, you'll put this in. I just wanted to, my cameraman didn't flip fast enough, but as you can see down inside, there is really nothing down there but the built-in tail shaft, basically. So I have a little post there that the tip of the shaft just sets on. And it just kind of flops around in there. Then we have our rear planet here, which will take a little goo on it because there is a number of washers in this unit that need to go on a certain way. And it's a little bit easier just to install it. Low roller sprag here, which is brand new, and we use a heavy duty model. So we'll drop this assembly inside where it can just rest. And then the next thing to do is install your low roller clutch, or I mean low reverse clutch. And this is what comes in it. We just beef it up with a little bit better clutches, but as you can see here. So we'll start with a wave plate. And these do go a certain way. It's a little, and the reason I say this is old school magic is because a 60, everything kind of goes in there just so, and this and that, and it kind of floats around. There's a little bit more end play. This is extremely sensitive to end play, and that is the real reason why these take so long. That and every clutch and steel, you almost have to wiggle that around. Just to get them to drop. So we will layer and layer and layer like we always do. It's been a long time since we've done a video, and you know, we all wanted to get back at it here, especially me. We were a little antsy to do this. And I don't think, I was on YouTube, I was looking around the past couple nights because I was debating on doing this transmission, and I'm looking, there is really no videos on it. That's why I say it's few and far anymore. The cars are few and far. And we're more or less here trying to do a video today of just more so instructional assembly than actually improving the hydraulics of it, okay? So there, unlike most transmissions, we are ending with a steel. Then we have this little funky clip. It's really flimsy. This goes a certain way. Your next builder, installer, tearer, parter, they will thank you if you put this in right, to where you can get this opening on the opening in the bottom of the transmission, so that way you can ease this thing out around the case. That's how you got to take it out. And if you don't put the opening, they're going to have to fish around with needle nose to find it. I'm just going to make a quick joke. You guys can see me stepping up and down here. I have a little booster seat because these things are just a little bit tall. This snap clip does not hold anything in. It's more so a spacer. Okay, so my opening is actually over here towards the park pawl, and that's where you would fish it out if you were ever taking this thing apart. Now the next thing would be the low piston rear center support. It's kind of got two center supports. This is the real one in my opinion, but this one's another one. Something to keep in mind about both of these, they are both interference fit. They need to go down a certain way, a certain speed, a certain touch, a certain feel. No hammers, none of that. You can't force this transmission together, no matter how hard you try. Something else to be aware of on this unit is this little apply clip, is what I'll call it. It's a little stand that just snaps in there. But the thing about this is, when you're putting this in, it's upside down and it easily falls out. So it's a very delicate touch, and we'll see if I can do it the first time. Now the only thing I want to check before I move on is, since you can raise and lower the output shaft with your little specialty tool because it floats, we need to make sure we're contacting all the clutches and all of that. So you want to raise and lower it real quick just to make sure we have teeth on everything. And then just spin the output shaft here. Alrighty. Now we'll just need a few minutes to work this thing down just so, without dropping our snap clip. Some hook and awls help. And you'll just have to play around with it here and there. Sometimes you'll have to pull it back out and start over. This is the part, as my teacher told me, that always kicks everybody's butt. come up over here. And there we have it. As you can see, that's a pain. And it, with your hands, it sets just so. And no hammers or anything will help you. It'll just get cocked and stuck. Wow, got me out of wind. What we are looking for when we have this installed is we have about the thickness of a steel in your low pack there, in your low reverse. And that's what we're looking for. That is a healthy clearance. It does not need to be uber tight. So the next is heavy duty bevel clip here. The clips in these are a huge pain. Again, everything in this, it's just that sensitive. And these clips do go a certain way. They go slant down, and the opening does not really matter where you put it, but you want to be able to get to it pretty easily. So I always stick them around the same spot. And you just work that in with your screwdriver, and now we have our lower section installed, and everything clearance-wise is great. The next thing we will do here is we're going to move on to this assembly. This is technically called the front planet, even though it's not really in the front. In the real front, we have the Overdrive planet. So it works a little different from a 4L60, a little bit better made. As you can see, it does actually have separate things for overdrive and stuff. And in an engineering standpoint, I just think it's a little bit superior. And as much of a pain, it is kind of a fun tranny to build. One of the things I wanted to talk about before I go putting some more parts in is this is the stock plastic washer that comes on this sun gear. We replaced that because we just don't like them. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with plastic in a lot of units, but in this 200, we like to use a new brass washer, more or less. We also use in our level 2 a hardened sun gear, or sun shell, I mean. That's a known failure point on a lot of transmissions, especially GMs. And it's just a little safeguard to help ensure everything stays just so. We have a snap clip here and the gear itself. And like I said, we are just throwing this away. Okay. The next thing is the front planet. I know that's confusing. And then the rear sun gear, front sun gear, right? And this goes a certain way. There is a groove cut all the way around, nicely on one side, and there's no groove on the other. There's a little bearing inside this Planet that doesn't have, I guess you would call it another taper on it. So this kind of acts as its own race, and we just put that in there. And don't forget the little bearing here. Okay. It's just checking all the fit and everything. Our sun gear goes in, and then I like to put the bearing in. And then our gear. And then our ring gear, our front ring gear here. So, frontal assembly. Okay. There we go. And then it has a unique little washer setup. And this is how you would set your end play. And this is the second part where this tool would come in. To do your snap clip, you have to actually raise everything back up, put your clip in, and then drop it back down. So it's a process. And we want to raise it up tight as far as it can go because we want optimal clearance when we do this. This is your snap clip here. This transmission, another thing, has a variety of these clips. They will fit elsewhere, kind of. Try not to confuse them, or they can pop out, but we'll go ahead. Just need to raise it up a little bit more. My washer is overhanging here. I'm actually remove one of these. Oh, you're good though. We're just doing a little video. What'd you need? Well, you're good. Yeah, we good. See you later. Okay. Okay, there we have it. Fits very snug, and then we'll drop our tool back down. And there we have a perfect end play. Sometimes with the, I know you guys can't really see this, but if you just pry a little bit on the input shaft, we've almost got it at near a perfect zero. And that's what we want. Okay. The next thing, moving on to some more interesting stuff, we have some of the drums here, and this is one of our upgrades, more or less, to the level 2. This transmission has 2 of everything. So here we have the input shaft, right? Everybody knows what an input shaft looks like. It plugs into the converter. Well, this on the forward drum is technically an input shaft. So we have a billet input shaft on a nice forward drum, and a little plastic washer in here that shouldn't come out, and don't forget to put that in. So I've already done a lot of seals and stuff in this transmission prior to the video because, as I said, these are incredibly time consuming. So we're going to begin stacking up some of the clutches in the forward clutch, and I think I have everything right, so this should go rather smooth. We're using these stage 1s. I like these clutches, they're very nice, and we're throwing in 6 clutches in this forward drum. So, as always here, we're going to start with a steel, clutch, steel, clutch. And for those of you wondering what this is going in, this is a 68 Buick Riviera. Like I said, the gentlemen that own this and another car are coming all the way here from the Netherlands just to get one of our builds. It makes me feel pretty good myself. Then we have our spring. Once we get our top plate on, these drums are a little tougher to stack stuff in. Pretty tight fitting. Everything is pretty exact in this transmission. Okay. Now, again, with your hands, the transmission builder's best tool, you're going to pull up on your clutches and move them around here. And if you could see that, hardly no movement up and down, but real free here, no drag. Once these apply, they'll set a little more, and we'll have our about 20 thousandths clearance, what we always try to strive for here at PerformaBuilt. Depending on the clutch set, though, like I said, comes down to knowing what you're dealing with, and something like that, that's more of a thickness of a steel rather than an actual one of these drums. So this will set here. We move that aside. Now we move on the direct clutch, the third clutch inside, and the second gear band on the surface of the drum, much like the 60 or the 700. And we do use a new drum here. That is important. I can't stress that enough. So in here, the third clutch, we have 8 frictions, kind of like the 4L60. Okay, there are similarities in all these GM overdrives, and at the same time, there's an insane amount of differences. But I'm going to start it here with a thick steel clutch. Our top plate, and our snap ring. Now, the same thing again as with the forward drum over here. You can't really feel these gauge in the way. But if I show you here a little screwdriver, we have a nice no drag. Once they set, they'll be absolutely perfect. Okay, now the next assembly, we take and combine these two drums. Kind of think of like this as the 60 input drum and the reverse input drum, just a little different functions in this unit. So we place it on top and give it a shake. And we're down. It's a little bit harder to get that one down than a gigantic input drum. Failed to mention here that we have some scarf cut orange rings in here that you need to put on. And all in all, moving on to our wide red band. Popular mod here at PerformaBuilt. These things are top notch. They really are. Great for any build, anybody. This is another one of these sensitive parts where you saw me struggle with the rear center support. Well, this is another one. So this band goes in first. We drop it down very evenly, just to avoid the band. Do 9 different things with the 2 hands I have. And the other thing is, I have a little thing I do to help drop this in involving vice grips, but as far as I know, there is no tool to hold this and put it in. So I'll show you guys a safe way to do it. Maybe you'll come up with your own. But the band simply goes down in. Like that. And it is important at the level, doing this yourself and you're feeling around there, you notice in that actually stops the back of the band from sagging down that way. On top of that. Now you guys watch me struggle again. Maybe I get lucky. So what I do with this, and this is the best way I found to do it, and somebody please correct me if there is a tool out there that you know of that I don't, but I wrap our splines in a little protective electrical tape here, just so we don't booger them up. Leave it loose, that way you can peel it off later. And then looking for it, pair of vice grips. It's the only way I know of. So I'll do this. I am forgetting something here that I need to throw in quick. This is an important piece I forgot to talk about. This is our thrust washer, and it comes in a variety of numbers for this unit. Okay, this is actually the next step. I'm just getting ahead of myself because, well, I've pre-selected this. It's just what came in this core, and everything should add up. It's a lot easier to build an older unit when you have the original stuff that came in it. When you mismatch things, let's say you change the output shaft, everything gets weird. After that, everything changes. Nothing is exact in all these old. So our little thrust wash simply sits on top of that output shaft, like so. Now, assembly. Okay. First, good. Made it past the band without snagging it. Second step, a little bit harder, shaking it in. And if If you guys can't see it, my transmission, my desk isn't right for this. It's kind of leaning this way. So if you actually, I think I just got really lucky. I think we have one more clutch. There we go. Boom, pop. Last clutch. Remove our vice grip and our tape. Good as new. Okay, the next step before we move on to our super special servo, we have an anchor pin, and you'll put that in there where it ought to go. Before I go any further with the band clearance and all that, I would like to mention one small detail that some may forget to do. It is hard to remember this sometimes. When you're doing that lower center support, as you all saw me fight with it, there is a little seal here, cup seal, that goes in this hole in the case section of the valve body, or as we call it sometimes, the rat maze. There is a hole in that support, and there is a hole in this plug, and it is lube. So we have to drive this new plug in with a new little rubber tip on it, and we have to drive it flat up against that center support. We don't want any lube just leaking out into the actual spinning section of the unit. So just a socket or something, you know, anything like that, that would help you through there. Just simply push it down in there. And here, I'm actually going to use a pump valve. I pulled out of this pump, and I'll here. We aren't going to reuse this, but great. Okay, just want to go a little deeper with it. Down all. Actually, it needs to be recessed just a little bit, so. Okay. I can't stress that if it looks down, it may not be, and just give it a couple taps just to make sure, because you will have a massive leak if you don't. Okay, moving on. And it's best not to do what I just did. Unfortunately, I fixed it quick, but your drum could fall out if you forget to do that, but we're good. Okay, now we're moving on to the servo. And this is a Sonax servo. And yeah, we're moving along here, right? Frank just said hi to me. Frank taught me how to do this, by the way. This is what he started with. This is his element. Let's just say that. We have a Sonax servo here. Sonax, the only choice, right? Great products, and they have this is essential in this unit. It just is, because the original one, I threw it away, but that's where it belongs. They have a few different ways you could set this servo up, and it is our pretty red color. What makes the unit just pop. Great for your classic ride, resto mod, show car, track, it doesn't matter. I wish you guys could see the transmission under the vehicle, but you just can't. We just want to do good for you. So a couple different ways to set this up in Sonax's kit. Often when you take apart your stock servo, you'll throw away a lot of stuff, such as this piece here. They do not want you to use this, and so here, we'll just chuck it. It won't fit. The older styles used to, but now the way they've designed it, it won't fit with that piece. They do have a spacer washer here. You don't have to use this. You only use this if you want a harder second shift. And in my experience, if you've ever driven one of these stock, they shift hard enough in second. We don't really want to mess with that too much. But you'll have your bell, your heavy duty spring here, and a small shim for it to rest on and not beat the crap out of the second servo, third accumulator. This thing is weird. It is not second and fourth. It's second only and then third accumulator. It works two different ways. Something to be aware of on this is there are two lip seals. Okay, one here, one here. Now, normally when doing a transmission, a drum, the lip seals are pointed downward, so when fluid strokes it, it can grab it and not just blow right by like Free Willy, all right? This one kind of works opposite. Some oil goes this way, and to push it back, some oil goes this way. So the lip seals on this need to be turned opposite. I know that's weird, but it's just how it works. And to be honest, it's pretty smooth. I like it. It's efficient. I'm going to set our little spacer clip aside. And, well, we're going to work on setting the band clearance now. I have here also a supplied fresh Sonax pin that comes in their little box kit, which we probably will need to grind off a little. I haven't done any of that, so you guys will be seeing the real deal. So first of all, let's lube it up and see just where we are at originally. Because oftentimes, you know, if you haven't torn apart your 200 or whatever, you can kind of see where the band clearance is at, and you can adjust it accordingly. They make these pins extra long because the OEM bands are clearances like this big. The thing just comes in and grabs. Ours is just quick. There's hardly a gap. So for us, we will need to grind some. For you guys, you may not have to. Now they've made this cup kind of easy. Don't be afraid of using a special tool to install this lip seal in the cup. It has a bevel. It kind of sets in there pretty nice, and it's one of the easier things, but it's just a little guy. Okay, and it slides in like so. We don't have the camera set up to where you could see it really, but if you do the top-down view, you could kind of see where the band clearance might end up being, maybe. Okay, so what we're going to do almost operates the same way I do the 4L60. And I'll put that on back later. That's just part of our shifter linkage. It's another strange oddity I'll explain. Okay, so I have my little wood clamp, my little compressor. It's very handy when you're doing this by yourself. And I've pushed it in all the way to where it's tight up against the direct drum on the second gear surface. And we're almost there, but I think I could shave off about a 16th, and it'll be absolutely excellent. So I will go to the bench grinder and wheel a little bit off, and then we'll see what we got. As soon as I find a pair of pliers, taking this out is a little trickier. It doesn't just come out. There we go. Okay, now I've shaved off a little bit, cleaned it up, and we'll go back to it. Slide it in. Okay, I think calibrated eye has nailed it, and we're going to try putting the clip in and then do a little air test and see where we're at, and then we'll take it all back out and install the final O-ring and move on to the actual center support. And it's pretty gravy from here. We'll get into the pump's kind of cool. It's very, very, very similar to the 6700, and we actually use a brand new 13 vein rotor and some other 60 parts in it. At the time they were inferior, we make them superior, and that's what is all that's about. I need my big needle nose. These are handy. And the clip isn't like the 4L60. It's kind of unique. Some 200s, the older ones, have a little hole that you can pick the clip out. These ones have bent tabs that you kind of have to just squeeze, pull, and in my opinion, it's a little bit easier. Okay. It helps to just wiggle the drum around and everything, and we'll move on to a little air test. I know you guys can't see the pin, but because it is tucked a little behind here, but I'm looking for roughly about a clip length. We don't want the band too tight, you know, this drum's spinning at a crazy RPM, but we want a quick firm grab, and it's way better than OEM. But we have it about, once it sets, it'll probably be maybe 20 to 40, something like that. Won't be too far off. So we have a nice band clearance. Sometimes you need a screwdriver to help you get this thing out. Okay, unlike the 60 where you just pull out the fourth one and snap the O-ring, we're going to pull the whole thing out and stick it in as an assembly. That's kind of how this whole thing has to go together, as an assembly. As you've seen, there's just one big section, two big section, three big section. Okay. Okay, now we take our gooed up servo that we know has the desired clearance for that awesome second shift. And our clip. Okay, just always good to pry up on the clip, you know, with a screwdriver, twist and tuck, and that way we know it's in. If you are building your own, make sure the servo bore is cleaned out, the corrosion and stuff gets real bad in there. If that ever pops out, it's going to be a big boom. So everything on this, it is an older unit, hardly any electronics, all steel valves, good, the good cast aluminum, right? And everything got to be real clean. Okay, next thing. We have our aluminum center support, and these are honestly the essential backbone of the unit. Keeps everything straight and true. It's not like the 4L60 where it's got a floating sun gear, sun shell type center support style. Everything just kind of hovers in there. This also has some steel rings on it and a plastic washer and we'll put it on after, but a pretty interesting little two-prong brass washer. These lip seals here, they're a little bit of a pain to get in also, but we've already done that, and the overdrive section sits on top of this, and we'll get into that later. But you want to put this in next, just as this piece alone by yourself, and make sure your two bolt holes are lined up with the bolt holes in the case so it can actually lock and do its job. If you are having some trouble, don't force it. This is the other interference piece that is a huge pain, but in my opinion, a little bit easier than that one. This tends to usually slide right down. So, just for good measure, I like the blue goo, and it doesn't hurt to put a little on your steel rings, even though they are steel and they don't really need it. Plenty of oil will get there as soon as you turn the key. And also, on these center supports, it's a good idea just to check your bushings, check it, not even so much bushings, just the actual housing. You know, these Teflon rings and stuff, they rub. You know, just make sure everything is smooth on this stuff and clean, and just so, or it's not going to go in. Believe it or not, we're not in yet. Okay. We are down, and I made that look way easier than it is, but I mean, literally, they're the same thing. Um, I was just turning it around just to make sure my two bolt holes are lined up. There are two bolts, and they are, this is one of them, and here's another one. They have holes in them, okay? It doesn't matter which one goes where. And other than that, you know, just I do not know the torque spec on these, but they aren't going to come out. And I have a, I've always just done them kind of hand tight, snug. They don't really see a lot of strain. It's more so this motion in the case rather than twisting motions. So that is a believe it's a 10 millimeter. Something I wanted to point out, I just moved it. We have a new website now, right? And everybody here, all the builders, all the know-how, me and Frank, Adam, Alan, we're all on the computers. If you guys don't have time to call, don't feel like texting, just on the website, want to ask a quick question, we are there. Us, nobody else. The guys that are actually doing your work are there talking to you about what you need or want, and we are the guys that answer the phones, we are the guys that build stuff, we are the guys that comment, Facebook, social media. We are here in the thick of it, and we're just here for you. So if anything, any questions you guys have, feel free to ask. There's 90 different ways to get a hold of us, and we're always available because we eat, sleep, and breathe it. So other than that, tighten these up. And I know you guys will harp on me for not using the torque wrench. It's just we've done this so much that you can almost do these with your eyes closed, and we just know how stuff feels. And we also have our guns on regulators and this and that. Anyway, we got them tight, and the next step would be an important piece, this little two-pronger. And it just like that. The prongs do go a certain way, and believe it or not, that is new. That's just how they look. And sits a certain way. And now we lock it all in with this, the second beveled clip. It's a lot bigger than the first one. You can't really mix these up. And this one is kind of sensitive to where you put it, not because the unit's going to explode or anything. It's just your next builder will thank you. And you just want to be able to, people just get to this stuff because sometimes. Oh. This takes a little muscle to get this thing in here. And another thing I mentioned previous, I just forgot to now, but the bevel side, just like the other one, you know, slant down. And there we have it. It's in, and trust me, up to this point, if you guys had questions, just reiterate everything I said. If you do not put everything in here just a certain way, you will not be able to even get past the first step. None of it will go together. None of it. Let's clean up a little bit. We like to work semi-neat here at PerformaBuilt, and now we're going to move on to this assembly. I guess I could put this in first. This is the piston, more or less. The center support that I put in acts as the housing, and this piece acts as the piston for the overdrive clutches. So it is kind of a okay idea if you put this in here first. Okay, so that just snaps in there like so. Now, before we get going, we have our overrun friction set. This is called the Overdrive. And we have our little input shaft here. Overdrive assembly. Overdrive sprag. Overrun. So, much like many of them, there's only two in here. And the nice thing about these is they actually have a label, this side up. Try not to confuse those, but it is handy. And I'm always looking for my favorite red screwdriver. Along with your hands, this is the #1 tool also. Okay, clearance is a 0 factor on overrun at any point. I don't know where you need the firmest engine braking possible. It's going to come on when it comes on, and you just want it kind of how it is. And you definitely don't want them to rub. So here we have our small carrier gear. And this is a little tricky here because this does have to be done in a certain sequence. You do have to put the clutches in, or I'm sorry, when you do the seals, you have to put the sprag in, then your clip, then the clutches, then this thing, and somehow get lucky all in between to shake this on. So we're going to line everything up. Okay. Just like that. Now, normally it don't go that smooth again, but there we have our free rolling motion and our locking motion. Free, lock. And, you know, it is too deep in clutches, and we're down on the sprag all the way. Okay. Then we have our bearing and Planetary, but before that, we're going to go ahead put the input shaft in. This is one assembly. There is a tiny little clip that holds this all together, and then we put on our carrier. Okay. There we have our completed assembly, minus the okay. Now another thing to do is you can test your, actions and everything. But before I get into that, get the next round of equipment together. And we have to, I'm probably going to need a hand doing this because this is a bit challenging. We have to put this spring cage in for the overdrive section, and it is a little bit of a chore. All I need to do is find my snap ring. I gotta go get my helper Frank, and we will put this spring cage in. Yeah, I need help with that spring cage. Throwing snap rings. If it comes out. Okay. Ready?
Here, now put it in that corner there. Hold on now, come around again.
We are in. Now, we do it one way. We like teamwork and all that. But I didn't like messing with the actual spring compressor. It's, believe it or not, is a bigger pain than that. But, excuse me, all we're doing is walking the clip around, and this is your return here for the overdrive assembly when the piston I put in comes up and applies the clutch. Now, that, okay. Just making sure we are everywhere we need to be. Okay, we're gonna go put this bad boy back in. And we're gonna start layering our overdrive section. Okay. Now, normally, the 200 only comes with 2 of these gigantic overdrive frictions. We at PerformaBuilt, we fit 3. And it's just a little extra holding power in 4th gear. There we have our overdrive section. Plate. Now, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to put this in first. Okay, it is a little easy. Some drums, like you've seen, some have to be built without stuff, some have to be built with stuff, and this one, it's a little bit easier. I'm tired of struggling. Our top apply plate there, and our snap clip. This one is heavy duty, but it does not have a bevel. And then, ignore my extra stuff here. This piece is semi-important here. It's more or less a safety.
That's good.
Yeah, it's just got.
It's just heavy.
I hate how my desk has the tilt to it. Anyway, enough about my cockeyed transmission mount. This piece here is a important piece. It's not necessary, but it is a safeguard. Just in case, GM figured if the snap ring comes up out of the recess there, that these 4 tabs will still push on the pump, and it will still let you have overdrive, you know, if something ever failed. That doesn't really happen, but hey, GM's thinking ahead. It's a good idea. Believe it or not, that was the hardest part of this whole unit. Most people don't get much farther than the rear center support there. Another thing here for end play, we have some selective washers. I've selected this one, and we're going to dive right into the pump and start showing you a little bit about that. But overall, I think, you know, we have a very solid build as a body here, and man, this thing ought to really rip and grip and be smooth, so smooth. The last one we did, incredible. I was impressed. Which, that one's sitting right over here. This one, this is our level 1 204R. This is our level 2 204R. Pretty similar, both very solid, and overall, just a nice unit. Always check your stator, you know, for any grooves for those solid rings. We have a new one, and we also, I will show you, we use a, you can't really see the blue too good on this one. I guess you can. We use a hardened spline. An older problem with these ones was these would just purely get worn out. I mean, they are from the 80s, and you can't expect some piece of metal to last that long when it's clicking and clacking all the time. So these hardened stators, they never go bad, and I've never really seen them wear either. We have our pump, and in PerformaBuilt, we, just like the 60, have done some prior mods to it that make it very unique to our own. One mod I will talk about is our little lockup valve here. It's not necessary to change that. It doesn't work the same way as the 60, but I've swapped it with a Sonax valve with Teflon seal, just for safe measure, just for a little TLC, tender loving care. And as you can see here, very similar to the 4L60E, except it has a mere 7-blade rotor, which I don't like that. We aren't going to use it, and what we are going to do is more or less build a 4L60E pump with it. So I have here a new O-ring for our slide, some nice hardened pump rings here, a 13 vein washer guide, a 4L70 spring for the pump slide, new veins, a new Teflon, a new rubber, and a new 13 vein rotor. We use these all the way up to our black edition. They do pump a high volume, and we hardly ever really. Our 13's the way to go. If you are in there, I don't recommend using the 7 rotor. Yep. Here, you can take this one though. This is a good one. So we are just going to pull all this out and discard it. Except the slide. We are not going to discard that. And we have a bushing, new bushing in here and all that. And for appearance wise, I'm going to start assembling this here. Okay. We simply, just like a 4L60, guide and ring. Just like that. A little goo or tranny fluid just to help the initial pickup of the fluid. Put a little in there because these things, if you don't, they will see a lot of wear. If you do, they shouldn't really ever wear that much. Just give it a little spin. And we'll go ahead and throw our spring in. And we don't want to use the stock spring. I've put this back together just to show you guys what we actually do to this pump here. Okay, and we just slide our veins in, easy does it. This looks very familiar, right? And just a little other tip when you do rebuild a pump, if you have your old rings or whatever, this should be tight. There should be no movement in the ring against the veins or anything, but it should just turn right around. But at the same time, shouldn't be able to move the ring back and forth. This just ensures a nice tight pump, maximum fluid. You know, this is your heart. Okay. Then here's our back half. And if you notice also, unlike the 60, this does not have a screen or anything like that. So we just pick a spot that matches up and install it like so. They have a little different style of a pump bolt. And virtually, we're doing this all the same way now. Just hand tight, we'll line the pump up, throw the gasket in, check our end play, and everything ought to be perfect. Now this pump is a little more sensitive than the 60. Normally I give it a good whack. This one, just a thumb tap. I want this loose, as I've explained before, and you guys have seen it for yourself. Pretty much an interference fit all the way up and down. Okay, so without any washers, without any O-rings, without any of that, we're going to set this down in and find our bolt hole. A few taps with a rubber mallet. Nothing hard, nothing crazy. And we're just going to move it around and make sure everything right there, nice and easy. Find the sweet spot. All about finding the sweet spot. Alrighty, yank this thing out of there now and be very careful turning it over, as this one is a little bit looser and you don't want to undo what you just did. Okay, a couple zaps, and we move on to this bad boy here, this selective washer. It does go in a certain spot. There's a lube hole here that this little hole has to set right on. So as you can see, there's your lube hole, and it goes on just so. So the next thing will be putting some gaskets on as soon as I can find them, and an O-ring. Here's our gaskets and O-ring. And a little grease helps hold it in place every time. Okay, and believe it or not, in this, the gasket does play into end play. It does matter. So when you are setting the end play with this washer, it's kind of important to put that in. I'm thinking we're pretty good. We ought to be, and I'll demonstrate. All in all, I guess we're there. May throw a little grease around this O-ring. I like everything to go in real smooth, especially this unit. Okay. Nice and easy. Before we compress this down and everything, since everything in this case is almost interference, it's kind of important to put your bolts in and all that. Everything's ready to go for the initial compression. For our bolts, they are a little bit unique. They have these little washers on them instead of O-rings. It's as old as these things are, it's important to replace them. So in your kit, whatever you order from, you'll have some brand new ones, because there's nothing more annoying than getting this thing bolted up and finding a leak at a bolt hole or something like that. So doesn't matter which way they go, simply slide them on the end. Okay. Even with the O-ring on, you still should have the flexibility, you know, just to be able to freely pump a little bit of this way, a little bit of that way, wherever you need to move it. That's how you know you have a proper alignment. If you don't line up the pump, you might have a cross leak, and definitely the next guy that takes it apart will cuss you out. Okay, everything's bolted down just tight and right. I already have thrown on here prior a lockup O-ring for our input shaft here, which you probably can't see. Okay, and then we have a front seal. Just clean up any remaining grease I have here. My hands are nasty. And then you have your front seal and a retainer, which I will put on later. Now, laying it down carefully. We have a little end play. That's what we want. And we'll move on to the valve plate, accumulators, governor, valve body. First thing to do is take this off. We don't need this, haven't needed it. But I can't stress you cannot build this thing without this little magnificent tool. Okay, we have our valve body. Moving along. Okay. Next up is our fourth accumulator. Now, this is kind of a sensitive subject here. In the 4L60, a lot of people know they can bypass it, and it'll actually benefit the transmission. In this case, if you bypass it, you will actually snap the transmission in half when you shift to fourth. So we do not want to bypass it. We want to put it in there exactly how it is and leave it that way, because it will break the bell right off the transmission if you don't. Next thing here is there is some balls that actually do go in the case, sort of like the 700, just there are more. The majority of the balls actually do go in the case, unlike its later cousin. So we'll gather all those up. Say we have one here, one here, one here. Here and here, and I think I have them all. Okay, that's correct, because there are 3 in the valve body, and that's what I have left. Okay. Now that we have our balls in, we're going to lay down the separator plate, or the valve plate, and then there actually is a separator plate on this transmission. Unfortunately, the reason why these transmissions are not very good is their hydraulics were plain pitiful. Well, we fixed that, and I can't get into that right now, but I have our pre-drilled valve plate here that has what I felt would be best for the 68 Riviera. We don't have a set shift kit. We just do it as we go. We just kind of know what we're doing. And, you know, depending on what the guy wants, we'll feel out how hard or soft or whatever to make his shift. Now, as with all plates, this does have a C and a V, so you don't mix it up. And we can go ahead and bolt on our second accumulator. This is another thing we're going to leave alone, because as I explained before, the second shift, if you've ever driven one stock, it is a little bit firm. It's in your face. And so the spring, the piston, everything, just going to leave it how it is. Big misconception: before you bolt that on, do not forget the sky. These accumulators have spring down, and they tend to hit a little hard. So if you just have a thin piece of valve plate there, it is going to beat itself to death right through it. It'll find a way. So GM has this thick boy here, which lays right on top of your gasket, and it actually comes with a whole another gasket to put on top of that, and a little grease will help. Okay, so gasket on a valve plate, on a gasket, on a separator plate, on a gasket, on an accumulator. That's how we do it. And we'll just line up our accumulator there. Now, there are a few different places where bolts need to go. Nothing that's going to like cause you some weird problems like locking down your sun gear or whatever, just like the 60. But there is a small bolt that has to go right here, or it'll punch right through and you will have some serious issues. Just like that. We'll get some guide bolts in. I think I came out of an alignment a little. Oh, good. It never hurts to double check, even if you've done this a million times. There's a lot of bolts that hold this little accumulator on, and that's why I say it hits real hard. It needs that support. So please don't forget that. Just put a couple dowels in, so that way when we tighten this down, it doesn't really go anywhere. There are certain holes in the valve body that are tighter, more or less. They are more so for the alignment, dowels, pins, homemade stuff, whatever you like using. Okay, we're going to go ahead and torque everything down nice and tight. Forget our little linkage piece here. That just clips on just like that. And I've already changed, the shaft seal here. Put the little carpentry nail in that they thought was a pretty good idea to use as a dowel pin. It's just how they are. That's a little neat, just a neat thing. Oh, that was my tube. All right, next thing I like to do, just to get it out of the way, is the governor. 200s came with a variety of different governors. We try to use Monte Carlo, Grand National, just a little bit better of a governor. Just gives a little bit better shift, but we adjust it accordingly. This piece sets right down and kind of away from the valve body and all that. And there is a little Teflon seal here on top that it's kind of a pain to change, but it is a good idea to do it because these are pretty sensitive. Okay, and you just drop it down in there until it locks on the worm gear on the output shaft, and then you'll install the cap and gasket for it. I like to put a little goop in the section where that Teflon seal rides, and then a little goop on the exterior of the housing. The goop helps, guys. Just saying. All right. This is just, I like to spray the gaskets and everything down with some PB Blaster. Any oil will work. It just helps the next guy take it off without welding it to the damn case. These things do tend to stick. So we just put this like so, and that is your governor. Okay, it's not a very complicated piece, it just kind of goes there. And the 700 is my preference because it has a side cap. This one, it's kind of a pain to adjust it because you do have to drain the fluid. Unfortunately, they put it back so you don't have to take any of this stuff off. That would be a real pain. This cap has some of the bigger bolts. They are 13s, and the rest are 10 millimeter for your reference. So, in other words, you need your hands, a tiny screwdriver, maybe a pry bar, some luck, and a 13 and a 10. Maybe a little luck to keep that 10 millimeter from floating around anywhere it's not supposed to. Alrighty, nice and tight. We're on the home stretch. We got a little S-link. This is our linkage. Pretty rare to come by. So she just hangs out if the clip and hole is lined up. Just like that. Now we have our valve body, and sorry, can't show you anything I've done to it, but we've cleaned it up, flat sanded it, make sure everything's nice and free flowing. All these valves stroke beautifully, and we have it set to our specs for this particular build. There's only 3 balls that go in this. Here, here, and here. Pretty much right in a line. It's the easiest way I could explain it. And goop is your friend. Okay, now comes a little bit tricky part. This has a odd shift lever here, and it is a little bit of a pain with the S-link to get on there, and the weight of it alone is but the important thing to remember is sliding it back as far as it can go and simply placing the valve body. Bingo. Awesome. Small adjustment. Okay. We're going to move on to the TV linkage here. I like to just set that there, throw a bolt in it just to get it out of the way. Kind of just move it off to the side. And you'll just use your judgment here. There are some bigger bolts, there are some smaller bolts. Some tangs are higher than others. There's 4 larger 10s, and then everything else is pretty much about the same. It's a little intimidating at first, but that's a little thing we do. Normally there is a cap there, a little bolt, but we make it easy for us to change out if we need to temporarily. That's what I was doing there. And that is for your second shift, by the way. And that's why we do it, just to fine tune. Almost lost my 10 millimeter. Now we tighten everything down. Okay, the reason I left the TV loose is get it out of the way, you know what I mean? But you have to put the lockup solenoid in, and it kind of gets in the way, and it's also got to be pushed back or it's going to get in the way of the pan and filter and all that. What I will be doing is getting rid of this lockup solenoid here and putting a brand new one on. Also, we have a new lockup switch here, which we need to install. And it goes here. Okay, that's all it really takes, and it doesn't need to be insanely tight or torqued or anything. It's not going anywhere. Just a few turns until snug, and we'll move on. Okay, here we have a new harness. Now, if you are using an aftermarket lockup solenoid, which these are everywhere, you'd have to use these little gold bolts in the kit, or it will bottom out and you will have lockup all the time. With these simple connectors, just, splice it in. They have a nice kit here, these little things that make it handy. You don't really need wire snippers or anything to do it. Okay, nice and tight. I just need to do the other end. Okay, that's pretty much all there is to that. We have our nice new lockup solenoid, a great idea to replace those. Like I said, 1980, last year, 1987. So you don't want to take that chance, but fortunately, if you do ever have an issue, you don't need to drop your transmission to change it. I do like to keep the wires facing inward, away from the outside of the pan and the TV cable linkage setup. You can get all that tangled up and everything, and you lose lockup or have some weird TV action or knows what. We put our two nuts on. My hands are incredibly greasy right now and I really need to wipe them. Okay, now we're gonna go back through. I like these little wire holders, so we'll go back through, put them anywhere really that you like them, and then hook up the connection here. We have a brand new plug in here. That's also a great idea. These things get old and plastic and brittle. It's a bit of a tight space. There, we have it plugged in. And then our lockup wire simply connects on there. I like to try to make this look as neat as possible. You know, you don't want to just throw your wiring in there. I'm kind of a perfectionist like that. And go here with it. Okay. And all that's pretty much left is our TV linkage here. And this has a little slot. It goes lines up with this roll pin, and believe it or not, it does rest on the TCC. Everything looks good. And guys, that went much smoother than I honestly thought. So here we have the level 2 PerformaBuilt 204R that you guys saw put together by myself. Pretty fascinating, lots of fun to build, straight from the 80s. Everybody loves the 80s. So Otto and Ronald, I'll see you guys all the way from the Netherlands soon to pick up your 2 units, your 2 beautiful cars, the Riviera, and I do not remember what the other one, the Descane, 61 Descane. That's something you don't see every day. Well guys, this is Ryan from PerformaBuilt. Again, we have a new website. We have t-shirts. We have just new stuff going on everywhere. We are just up and we're all excited about it. And soon I will do another video on a 4L60. It'll be easier and involved, but it was nice to see something different. Am I right? This is the granddaddy of the Overdrives. It is the original, and it is a great, smooth, awesome PerformaBuilt unit when it's done right. So thank you for watching. This is it. And, you know, we'll see you guys next time. We'll do a video soon.